The Skinwalker comes from Native American folklore, in particular the Navajo, although other tribes have similar kinds of legends of shapeshifters. This is a little bit like a werewolf, a little bit like a werebear, or some other creature that can transform, a human being transforming into an animal or some mix of human and animal. This allows the human to sort of move around in a stealthy manner, unseen, and gives them the kind of special powers of, say, like a coyote or a wolf or a bear. And so there have been other references to skinwalkers lately. Since the 90s, it's become kind of a trendy term in terms of a UFO region in Utah, which has come to be called Skinwalker Ranch. Now, this is only barely tangentially related to the Navajo tradition of the Skinwalker. And so today we're going to focus on this Native American tradition of folklore of a shapeshifter. All right, welcome to Monsterology on Skinwalkers.
Okay, here's the first image, which is a skinwalker as a bear, sort of combination human and bear. I did some sketching and traditional techniques. We're going to see how we did that. And then I also did a digital drawing here based on 19th century photographs of skinwalkers out of the Navajo shaman tradition. And here again, I tried to do sort of it's a bit more like a wolf, but I was going for a coyote skinwalker and then a traditional Navajo portrait of a man in traditional Navajo dress. So here you see me working with a technique which I've never used before, but it turned out to be quite nice. I used watercolor pencils. So they're light colored pencils, but when you add water to them, they basically dissolve, and you can get some rich tonal variations and value changes. And so you'll see me doing the drawing here with what look like colored pencils, but then I'm going to come in with a brush with just plain water on it, and you'll see some wonderful effects can be achieved in that method. All right, skinwalkers are not well understood, I think. There's a lot of sort of fake Hollywood versions, and in larger popular culture, it's become sort of a code for interests in paranormal things in general. But really, there is a core idea here within Navajo theology and cosmology that really forms the central idea of the skinwalker. The skinwalker is a shapeshifter. It is a person who has basically become what we might, using another language, call witch. The witch is somebody who operates outside of the usual community notions of good and values and sort of goes it alone as a selfish, independent, aggressive person. And what they're doing essentially is trying to use magical forces to undo the good or well-being of others. And this is, again, a kind of common feature when the Navajo thinks about their general well-being and the good, particularly including things like medicine or health. So religion is not separate from life in Native American beliefs, and nor is medicine separate from religion. So when someone is ill or doing badly, the thought is, yes, go to a doctor, but also make sure that you see the local shaman, and the shaman and the elders will perform a series of investigations and then possible ceremonies to help you with these additional supernatural forces that may be upon you. So the skinwalker is part human, just somebody who wants to do bad and go against you, but also by wearing, let's say, the skin of coyote or the skin of a bear and then performing certain kinds of magical rites, it is believed that they can also become like those animals. Skinwalkers, according to a number of stories, will actually climb on top of the hogan, which is the home of a family, and then while the family is sleeping, they'll drop a kind of pollen or a dust that's made from the bones of human infants into the smoke hole, and contact with this substance then brings the sleeping person, bad health or social problems, and can even, the belief is, even sometimes cause them to die. So there is a sense that when you're doing badly, the elders will investigate to see if a skinwalker might be involved in this. Now, skinwalkers have many different legends, and some of them are thought to essentially be transformations that are the result of terrible murders. So it's thought that somebody who violates the basic norms of Navajo culture by engaging in something like incest or the killing of a sibling would then be able to attain this dark power of the skinwalker. So they're a source of chaos. One way in which you can exorcise the skinwalker, if you've been bewitched by that, is you need to get the elders to basically perform what's called a sing. And the sing is basically a ceremony where the shaman comes in and does a ceremonial singing. It's sort of a combination performance where the family's very much involved. Also, they'll investigate the house to see if there's any buried witchcraft objects in the home. And sometimes the belief is that these witchcraft items, the skinwalker has secretly put them into your body as well. So there's a kind of interesting sort of Native American psychological surgery that's oftentimes adhered to. There's all kinds of interesting features of this. I mean, the medical community, there's a wonderful sort of group out of Albuquerque, I believe. This is the University of New Mexico Medical Center, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They treat a number of craniofacial anomalies in Native American children, and they have taken to trying to understand the local culture in order to better address, medical issues. So they'll oftentimes talk with the children about things like skinwalkers and the idea of doing a sing to help. And so there's a kind of integration with the local culture and not a kind of dismissive superiority, but a nice sort of melding of the two cultures. There's some obviously colonial dimensions to this too that scarcely need mention, but it was very common for missionaries to use notions that were indigenous, spiritual notions like skinwalkers, as part of their sort of campaign for converting Christians. So today even there's a sort of Pentecostal missionary tradition of what's called spiritual warfare, and they use the language of skinwalkers as a way of talking to Native Americans about how Christianity can achieve power and dominion over these evil powers. So they don't teach Christian demonology, but rather they treat the local monsters as a sort of general evil threat that Christianity can potentially protect you from. So there's a lot of that going on too in the mix of the different cultures. Generally speaking, though, the skinwalker is thought by Navajo to be the sort of antithesis of Navajo values. So the values of the Navajo are community and family first. It's a very strong filial or familial culture. And oftentimes when you ask people who are willing to talk about skinwalkers, usually adults will not, but children will, the stories are oftentimes about how if you break away from the family or if you separate from the family, you can then be susceptible to skinwalkers. So skinwalker stories, especially told to children, and the legends are oftentimes about creating, in groups versus out groups, and sort of preserving traditional Navajo ethics and values and norms. So back to the drawing here for a moment. I'm trying to do a kind of a coyote skinwalker here, and as I said at the outset, it looks a bit more like a werewolf than I had hoped for, but I'm just what can I say? One can't always render what's in one's head, but I do like this technique. What I did here is pencil drawing first, pen and ink over the top of it, and now I'm laying in a series of washes, and I'm getting some fairly nice ominous effects emerging out of that, which I like a lot. This is basically, I tried to find images of some of the actual jewelry out of the Navajo tradition to include here, and this was a common necklace that one sees in Navajo costume or clothing. I basically keep going back into this with different washes of ink, and then I basically decided, okay, well, what would this person look like perhaps before the transformation? And so I wanted to really try to do a kind of just a conventional portrait of a Navajo Indian. And so I turned after this to trying to capture, just in a sort of pencil sketch, a traditional Native American Navajo man. I think these stories are fascinating. We see shapeshifters in all different cultures. It's fairly common to see the shapeshifting tethered to the local predators. So if an animal is particularly dangerous in the region, like let's say a bear, then the person who shapeshifts will often has become that predator. The coyote is an interesting story because there's a general sense in many Native American religions that, or sort of really cosmological pictures, that the coyote is both potentially bad but potentially good, more like a trickster. So the coyote has power, but it could go either way, and you see that oftentimes sort of cropping up in some of these stories and images. Here I'm doing that portrait of the Navajo man, and I think that pretty much summarizes the overall story of the Skinwalker and puts it in a larger context of shapeshifting. Anyone has the potential to become this kind of a monster within the Native American theology. There are ways to overcome it, and the idea here is that the cultural or normative education within the Navajo tradition is trying to make sure that kids don't turn towards the life of vice, but stay on the true path of virtue. And in that you can see a great deal of sort of solidarity with sort of traditional European stories about witches and demons, and how important it is to sort of enshrine the values of cooperation and ethical, group behavior. So there's a combination of the two, and that pretty much covers the Skinwalker, at least as far as we can do in a short little video like this. If you like this kind of thing, please hit the subscribe button and come back for more content, and I'll see you next time. Take care.